Well, it is my absolute privilege and pleasure to speak with a man that I've had the opportunity to speak with a few times in the past. Mr. Tata, it's always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here at TyCon. You've been called many things by the media, but here's an interesting one. There's a piece that has labeled you India's accidental startup investor. How do you respond to that?
Well, you look at the entrepreneurship in India as such. First, you look at what has uh, happened in the US. It's been an exciting time for startups. Um, People have had ideas that they've been able to convert into, in some case, multi-million, multi-billion activities that you never thought would see the light of day.
Mm.
And in India, the entrepreneurial spirit has always appealed to me, but more often than not, there is a feeling that I've had that whatever I want to do would be in some form or other in conflict with the Tata Group. So all the time that I've been in Tatas, I have felt that I would be having a conflict of interest or some kind of self-interest, which has kept me away from the excitement of entrepreneurship. So you come to a phase in your life where you're no longer with Tatas and you are on your own. Um, what you do does not have an impact on Tata Steel or X or Y or Z. And I thought this would be the time to look at uh, doing something with startups.
It's
Now, of
it's
course,
been
a change of, pardon?
sorry, go ahead.
No, now the game's a different one. I have only my pocket money to play with. It sounds very uh, it sounds awful to hear me say that to play with, as though I was playing with Tata Steel or TCS or any, but the truth is that you're looking at um, an entrepreneur who wants to do something, is willing to talk to you, hoping to get your views for whatever they're worth, and um, then you're suddenly in the shoes of the small entrepreneur with an added responsibility that it's something you're doing uh, rather exposed. You could make a mess of things and gain that kind of image, or an image where you add value.
Well, Mr. Tata, I think many of us would like to have the kind of pocket money that you have at this point in time and make the bets that you're making. But just on the kind of bets that you're making, as well as the fact that you've learned perhaps things very differently today, being in the shoes of a small entrepreneur, as you put it. What's been the biggest learning as an investor working with over 20 plus startups? And what kind of risks, what kind of bets are you now willing to make with this changed landscape of a post-COVID world?
Well, when I was initially interested in entrepreneurship, it was always the same kind of excitement. If somebody said they could do something which otherwise was not possible, I was the one in Tata's usually that was urging that we do this. So I was while in Tata's, involved in the Bay Area and in some of the early computer startups, uh, some of the uh, software startups, and those were exciting companies for me. I was in Tata, so I was not doing anything myself. I was doing it in the name of Tata. Um, Now I have, if you might, another kind of responsibility to to be advising people. And what I have found was that what mattered the most was how you interacted with, or what interaction you had with the founders. A founder that you spoke to and you heard about who was looking at selling out to a large manufacturer, a large company, was probably not the person that you wanted to associate with, because he was going to cash out whenever he could.
Mm.
And it may help him, but it may not be the right thing for the investors that that invested in his company. But there is also the other thing is you would you would look at companies, you look at the founders of the company, and you'd find in some cases a genuine urge to make this the market leader or the the entrepreneur that was making one proud, against someone who is just looking at cashing out.
Mm.
And there were, we won't mention names, but there were companies that I thought would crash instantly and nobody would put their money behind it, and that small entrepreneur worked wonders with his company and had great success, and there were others that failed. So to me, the relationship you establish with the founder, the truth and faith that you put on the table or he puts on the table, uh, would be the difference between a flashy entrepreneur who is either trying to copy another company that's been successful, or that has a dream that doesn't come true. Um, uh, that's the difference.
Yes, and you're right in pointing out that it is often the equation that you build with a founder that could determine whether you write out or check or not. And you've previously also spoken about how you've been intuitive in your investment decisions. But Mr. Tata, you raised a couple of interesting issues there in your comments. One is the risk-taking ability of people like yourselves, people who've run conglomerates who are today at a point in their lives where they can encourage and nurture the startup ecosystem. And there's been a lot of emphasis on trying to unlock domestic pools of capital, but it's been a slow start and it continues to, while it's gathering momentum, not at the pace that's required. What do you think it will need to ensure that that actually becomes a reality? And secondly, what's the role that you see for the government to play in order for us to be able to push the innovation agenda further?
Yeah, that's a great question. Uh, First of all, in days gone by, entrepreneurship had no place in the Indian economy because you either had a bankable project, or you didn't. And there was not that middle ground of risk capital by entrepreneurs. which we now have. It's relatively small, but we still have it. And that's a great change, and that's what you've seen. But we need to recognize that what we're looking at is um, foreign foreign money. We're looking at investors overseas who are looking at our entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurs, the founders, and put their money behind those small companies in with of a magnitude that you can't find somebody playing in India, which is unfortunate because we're really um, putting our money behind foreign-owned projects, which in a way I'm glad we have because we have entrepreneurship and startups because of this. But if we had a bigger play, and if large enterprises were to put large amounts of money into large amounts of their money into projects, we would get an interesting uh, play in terms of what to do. That's also, as you can see, starting to happen. You can see um, players looking at this, others following. You asked an important question: what role should government play? Um, the government can play a very important role in furthering technology, which as yet the private sector cannot do. Cannot do because it's big money, it's high risk. But if you look at some of the most interesting uh, startup companies or startup activities, they've been from people who have used government money to institute an activity. Uh, that investment would never have happened without that government input. Let me expand that. I'd like to take an organization like DARPA, which is the US government's development agency. DARPA has put billions of dollars into um, integrated circuits, medical electronics, um, life sciences that no one would, not no one, but very few people would put their money into because it would be a long drawn out thing and it may not work. But if you look back on it, there are enormously impressive areas which have been funded by DARPA, um, with seemingly no future. But because of DARPA's investment, those companies have had the funds, and DARPA has had the insight to to enable those industries to take form. So without the uh, entrepreneur that we have, it's funded on outside money, and without companies, government companies like DARPA, the scene would have been quite different.
Yes, that is a valid example, but the government has got the Startup India Fund and so on and so forth. But I want to steer the conversation away from the government to the role of the private sector in nurturing the Indian startup ecosystem. What role do you believe large conglomerates like the Tatas, like the Reliance Group, etc., can play because one of the aspects that you just brought up was that startups are much more agile, much more nimble, perhaps in many ways more disruptive than legacy businesses. So we are now starting to see conglomerates acquire startups. We're starting to see partnerships and collaboration. How do you see that playing out?
Well, I think the plays are the same. Uh, who who looks at it as a question of what kind of vision one has. Um, but the there could be two kinds of roles that we're talking about. One is an area where I am now putting myself back into the industrial entity that there was. I've got disposable funds. I'm going to start investing in startups, which I will control and I will own, and I will provide myself with um, activities which I would otherwise not get into. And I could do this by setting up family offices, by creating small venture capital based companies, where you can argue that yes, I'm using my shareholders' money, but I'm providing them the opportunity of being in this activity. Um, that's different from what you've seen in the Bay Area time and time again. I put all my money into this. I borrowed money from investors and friends. I have a responsibility to see this uh, become a reality, and I'm going to give it all my best to make this happen. That segment of the enterprise has been the one that I've been most impressed by. Usually, um, a bunch of ex-students who have had a common view of something that could happen. Um, a company like Google that's been established, where two two colleagues in college could decide that they're going to start a search engine. And then you look behind the vision and the entrepreneurial spirit that there is, and you have to say, wow, that's something that's very impressive to look at, to for someone to put their money into, to become a part of their life. But look what it's done. So it's it's so exciting, an area that I find it difficult to put words behind it. But when you look at a deck of investable options and you look at some of the propositions that are made, a lot of them are copies of successful startups, and those are, unless there's a jewel somewhere, those are probably not going to be successful. Maybe would become Me Too companies, and that would be all. But the one which has the greatest vision and a spark that explains how he's going to get to that goal, um, which does not, you don't find that with everyone. Those are the jewels that one looks for, that creates the enterprises that you and I are referring to just now.
You talked about how Google had the wow factor. You're probably looking at a bunch of decks and investable opportunities on a daily basis, Mr. Tata. What has wowed you, or what wows you today as you look at opportunities? Which are the sectors that you feel that you must back? Because you also said that this is an opportunity that people must capitalize on, and you can stretch the envelope to as much as you want. So where do you believe the constraints lie? What is wowing you today? How are you looking at the investment landscape?
Well, I think first of all, you have to accept that you're going to have a choice of, let's say, 10 companies, of which 8 are going to fail. They may fail for lack of investment, they may fail for a mistaken element, but that they're not going to be highly successful. And that's not going to turn you away from looking at enterprises, that you're going to continue the quest to do so, because 2 or 3 out of 10 are going to succeed. Or you hope that your vision enables them to succeed. Uh, there's no pro forma that tells you that if you go down this checklist that you're going to be backing a winning company. One may be in healthcare, one may be in life science. You may have 4 or 5 in electronics. You can have unbelievable connections between, let's say, electronics and life sciences or nanotechnology, or these are actually areas of enterprise that have come from uh, these new areas of business and are going to continue to be exciting areas. And some of them, unfortunately, you get terribly excited about as something that can happen, let's say, almost like science fiction movies. You can see that this really could be so. You could have a telephone conversation with another person in another language and speak as though it's the same language that you're talking in interacting with a person in real time in a very different way. And it may seem, again, that this would be terrific, but it doesn't work, or it doesn't work with these founders. It's all a question of the people behind, the brains behind the enterprise you're looking at. And in my view, the link that you have to the investor is, do you give that investor the chance to play out that role model that he wants to, or are you going to constrain and try to second guess him as you go along? Both have their pluses and both have their minuses. But the entrepreneur who enjoys the trust and the confidence and the excitement in a new venture is going to be more successful, or should be more successful, than the other one who's trying to use his vast knowledge and his risk awareness also to control the enterprise is going to have.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Tata, we saw the last crisis, the recent last crisis was the financial sector crisis in 2008. Today, what we're seeing is much more widespread. It's a humanitarian crisis, it's a medical crisis, as well as an economic crisis. And it sort of put uh, leaders in positions of power to review purpose. And I know that you're someone who has believed in driving a purpose-led organization, purpose-led companies. Once again, the emphasis and the focus is on stakeholder capitalism as opposed to just shareholder capitalism. What would your advice, what would your view be to people who are navigating business at this time and evaluating profit and purpose?
That's a difficult question to answer because there'd be a lot of um, answers that would be the same. You know, you'd want to have the openness, you'd want to have the freshness of view, you got to have the right risk-taking attitude. You have to lose some things and move on. Wind up businesses that you don't see as being appropriate, rather than carrying on and dragging those businesses deeper and deeper into debt by virtue of believing that there's something in that. All of those issues, I uh, that are, in my view, intuitive issues rather than, you can look at a very promising projection of profit and loss, which has no meaning
Mm.
because it was made up of the wrong principles or it had the wrong type of leaders. So a lot of things have to come together to be successful. The important thing is you can do this with the trust and faith between the investor and the enterprise. You have the best chance of success. But there's no, as I said earlier, no pro forma that you can follow that can guarantee you success.
Absolutely. But one of the other areas that you've spent a lot of your time focusing on is corporate social responsibility. How do you see that playing a role in nurturing ideas that will impact India's problems at scale? What role do you believe the private sector can play to enable that to happen?
I I'd have to answer that the same way that um, you're looking at another palette, uh, a palette of not of just entrepreneurship. If that gets merged into the image, that's fine. But you'd get involved with how can I raise the quality of life of the people I'm serving, and that's a different uh, different scene, and it has more compassion in it. Its ability is not uh, to have a huge market, though that may be there for a successful startup, but a market that changes the way that people live, gives people an opportunity to survive, certainly in countries like ours. And if it at the same time makes someone wealthy, that that money would probably go back into um, in, improving the quality of life as one went along. And there you see different people like uh, uh, Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and some of the entrepreneurs who have put their money back into businesses because they were good for they felt they were good for the country or for humanity. Um, and it's a different thing. I'm involved with the Tata Trusts, which have been playing a role in improving the quality of life, the communities that they serve, and also dealing with malnutrition and um, health care and looking at a cure for cancer and such. All of those are equally exciting in their own way, but the expectation that you have and the success that you derive are different.
Yes, that's true. But Mrs. Tata, I want to go back to your role as an investor. How much time do you spend with with the founders that you've decided to back? What is the equation? What is the relationship like? What's the learning that you take away? What's the value that you believe you've been able to add?
First of all, I have to say that I have not been as successful in giving them the time that many of them seek. There are some who, there's an informality first that they can walk into my office or fix the time to meet, and I'll give them that time, but I'm not there all the time that one would like to be there from my side. Uh, and much of it depends on the human interaction between the founder who promises a lot and doesn't do that much, and the founder who really is bringing freshness to the business that he's looking at. I think if one cannot make that differential between what's really exciting and what is said to be exciting, um, then you miss the boat, if you might.
Hmm. You spoke about Me Too companies, and that was part of the sort of trend, which I imagine is the natural course of things when you start to see companies starting up. 10 years ago, that perhaps was more of the kind of stuff that we were seeing as opposed to today. As you look at startups today, do you believe that they're far more mature in their business models, far more differentiated, and far more global in their approach as well?
Yes, I think that would be true, but probably by virtue of the collection of industries we're in, namely heavy industries, etc., we have much more invested into the traditional, no longer smokestack industries, but we're much more involved in high high investment level, high business risk, but newer areas or spin-off areas that have emerged as interesting areas, and most importantly, a willingness to do what the kind of thing that DARPA has done, put money that you know will be at high risk, but if it works, it'll change the way we communicate or change the manner in which we uh, look at healthcare or whatever it is that may be. So, you know, just thinking out loud, um, if you had the ability to think of creating an artificial eye
Mm.
that could send an image to your retina and produce an image that would eliminate blindness, would that be an exciting area or not? would you look at $100,000 solution of that nature, or would it start to excite you if you did this for $200? Um, but could you get somebody's sight back? Could you make somebody walk again who is confined to a wheelchair? All of those things. You sat back in a room and said, what do I need to do to make that happen? I need this technology to take place, this to be resolved. I need money to prove the point I'm making. And in there would lie some very, very exciting proposals.
Mm.
Uh, it's a question of how you look at them.
Yes. A few of the comments that I want to pick up on what you just said, the lack of innovation as far as the smokestack industry is concerned, and that is an industry that you've spent a lot of your career sort of dealing with. Do you believe that we are likely to see disruption there? Two, in light of the COVID pandemic and what it's done to the world in terms of reshaping the way we work, the way we live, at least temporarily for the near future. What kind of opportunities do you believe that throws up, and what does that mean then as far as your own investment playbook is concerned?
Well, I think the pandemic is an example of how we have adapted in some ways successfully, in some ways unsuccessfully, in leading our business life in a different manner and not locking up our enterprises and walking away, leaving millions of people without jobs, etc. So I consider the successful companies that have traversed this kind of uh, period as being very successful adapters to vastly changed business uh, structure. But if you ask yourself, is this really good? I'd have to say in some cases you may find that you found a cheaper way or a less expensive way to do your business. But has it put a lot of people out of jobs? Has it um, been a strain on you and you turn to the government for uh, financial support or whatever? It's not one where every one of the businesses has an innovative element which you can look back on and say, I never thought one could do that, but it has been done. There's much more tradition and um, repetitiveness in what we have done under those circumstances.
Yes. Let me end then by asking you, Mr. Tata. I mean, you're active on social media. You're on Twitter. You're now also on Instagram. Are you enjoying that experience? And you said previously that there's nowhere to escape from the virus and from the pandemic. But with the vaccination and hopefully with the world opening up, where would you like to escape to?
Where would I like to replace to?
Escape to.
Escape to. Um, well, if I think about how would I like to be remembered,
Mm.
I would like to be remembered as a person who was able to make a change. uh, who is able to be responsible for some change in the way we looked at things. What that might be spelt out as, I can't really say, because I have a feeling that that's going to just happen one day, where you become the innovator of something that people have talked about uh, and not done. And you have found that little alley that enables you to do something which people thought was unviable and not possible. That would be an immensely um, exciting area to be in. And if one could have that satisfaction of saying, I enabled an artificial eye to be
Mhm.
created, or I enabled X or Y or Z to happen, that to me, even if it were not financially the most successful, what it brings to the world would be exciting to a person like me.
Well, I started the conversation by saying that you've been labeled as the accidental investor, but in your own words, you'd like to be remembered as the change maker. So, Mr. Tata, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here. We wish you the very best of luck, and we hope that you continue to drive change and have and make impact. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. Nice to be with you again.